Hey everyone, welcome to Bestie Book Reviews. I'm here with my bestie Mandy.
And I'm here with my bestie Jessica.
Welcome to another one of our Bestie Book Teas where we discuss all the books that we have read over the past week. So Mandy, how was your reading week this week?
I actually did pretty good. I read 11 books. I read quite a few novellas because I really just wanted to get ahead of my reading goal, or at least be on track, because Goodreads is mean.
Mandy feels that Goodreads is a bully at the beginning of the year when it tells you, like when you set your reading goals in there and it's like, oh, you're 2 books ahead or you're one book behind. She really does. So how many books did you read?
11.
I'm just counting mine right now because I forgot to do that. Okay, so you read 11 and yes. I read, oh, this is sad. I read 5.
Oh, so we're reversed. I think that's where we were last week.
I know. So I had, like, as you know, I had a crazy week. I am contracted to work with certain people, and my biggest client had a huge event at the office, and I've been working 13, 14-hour days for the last 3-4 days. So and this is, and normally I can sit and read, and I couldn't because we're live on a broadcast and I can't listen to a book. So my reading week was really slow.
That's gonna happen.
It's gonna happen. Yeah. So we did our weekly our reading challenge last week. Did you read? You said you read a lot of novellas this week, right?
I did.
So our ultimate reading challenge was read a novella. I read a novella that we'll talk about next week because it goes with one of the books that I read that I just finished it. So it's on my next week thing, but it's a Pam Godwin novella. It's Heart of Eve is what it's called. So it's a second book in her trilogy. It's a little novella in her trilogy. So, okay. So read a novella.
Yes. I read Naughty Boss by Whitney G. That was my novella for this, and then I just happened to read some more. So are we going to open?
Some of these titles that you pick up, I wonder. Naughty Boss. Okay, yeah, open.
Okay. You're doing a better job of like holding yours.
What is it?
It's a little card. It says, there are lots of books in here.
So it must be like a bookmark, like because you can put the thingy through the hole and make it a bookmark.
Yeah, you could.
So that must be what that is.
That's cool.
There are lots of books in here.
Yes.
Especially up
I
in
like
here.
that. That's cute.
Yeah. Okay. So
the next one is we're going to go straight down, and it's read in a place you've never read before.
Okay, that should be interesting.
That should be. I look forward to hearing a place that you've never read before. I tend to read a lot. And so where most people will like stand in the grocery store line and scroll on their phone, I'll pull my Kindle out and read standing in line.
Yes.
So I read in a lot of different places.
The hard thing is, though, is that we both live in very small towns. So we pretty much read in every location in a small town. So
I was thinking of places in my house.
Oh, okay.
That maybe I could read.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. I look forward to hearing where we've read.
I know. Okay, so before we start with our weekly review or our bestie book tea, don't forget to hit that subscribe button down below and make sure to leave us a comment and a like.
We would love some comments.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so are we going to just talk about 5 books each? Is that what the plan is?
Yes.
Okay, so what's your first book? What first book you read this week?
Okay, my first book this week was from Cora Reilly, the Born in Blood Mafia Chronicles. It was Bound by Temptation.
Ooh, so I bet you like this one. It's got your age gap.
It was Liliana and Romero. Romero is Liliana's sister's bodyguard. So you might have remembered me talking about Gianna and Aria that are Liliana's older sisters. She this book starts with her having a crush on the bodyguard, and then she turns 18 and really just wants to be with him. She kind of gets to spend the summer with him when she spends the summer with her sisters. He is in the mafia world just a soldier. So he's Luca's right-hand man. Basically, Luca trusts him with his wife's life, and just they're actually really, really good friends. But this relationship between the two of them would start a war between Chicago and New York, because Liliana is from Chicago still. The ties between the two sisters' marriages have already kind of cemented something, but war is still brewing. But Liliana marrying a mere soldier from the New York outfit is no good. So, of course, what would her loving father do? But, of course, arrange a marriage to a man that is literally her father's age, which is just kind of gross. And there's a lot happening in this story, but because it's part of a series, it is a standalone, but I really feel like you need to read the series to really love the series and the books. So I don't want to say too much about it, but basically Liliana is kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. If she follows her heart, war is going to break out. People she loves could be killed in this war, because it's very reality based in the mafia world there. Or she can marry this old man that is not described well at all in the book and be stuck with him, but saves her family. And so she knows in her heart that if she talks to her sisters, that they will help her as much as they can, but she just doesn't know, like, does she want that on her conscience if something goes wrong, because it will cause a war. So this is that story, and it is delightful. I'm really enjoying this. I'm forcing myself to take some breaks, so I'm just reading some other things, but definitely going back to that series this week. Awesome. What do you got?
I have a series that, again, I put off. I've been putting this off for a while. But I have I read American Queen, which is the Camelot series by Simone. So this is the first in the Camelot series. I will hopefully finish the rest of it this week, because they're all on audio, so I can listen to it. But I put it off because, I don't know, I just did. I like to do that, apparently. But this is the story of Greer Galloway. And Greer is the granddaughter to a past vice president. And he has, like, trained her as she was growing up to, he'd take her to these, events in DC. And she was trained on, like, how to talk to people, like, to gather information for grandpa. And so we first come upon her when she's really young. She's in her really, really young. She meets a guy that's kind of weird, and he's like, don't give your kisses away. And she's going, what the heck is he talking about? This guy's creepy, whatever. He's always in the picture. Like, we find out what that means later on. He's not a love interest at all, but we find out later on what he means by that. But then as she gets older, she's like 16. She meets this guy who's a war hero. And they have, like, her first real kiss, and then he realizes how young she is. He realizes who she is, and he kind of so he goes off to war. They meet up a couple years later when he comes back, and it's the night that he is, like, night after he got engaged to somebody else. They just have, like, this instant chemistry. And that night she meets a guy. So his name is Ash, the guy that just got engaged. And then she meets that night Embry, who is a guy that Ash had saved when he was fighting overseas. And then the story will progress. Like, we see it kind of in flashbacks, but then the story kind of progresses, and basically Embry becomes the vice president, and Ash is the president of the United States in current times. And Ash wants her as his woman, but there's something going on between Embry and both of them. So this is very interesting. I gave it 4 stars. I know a lot of people just love this series. They love Sierra Simone. Sometimes Sierra Simone is kind of a hit or miss for me. I'm very intrigued as to what's going to happen here. I do know that it is a menage type relationship, but because it is. I know you love that word, don't you? It is. I knew that going into it. Everybody knows that knows about this book. But yeah, so I'm very, very curious to see what's going to happen next.
All right.
So what you got?
Okay, so I read Naughty Boss by Whitney
What
G.
the heck? Oh, that's what you're telling us, a novella, right?
Yes.
You
That's
and
my
these titles. I'm telling you, Mandy finds the oddest titles for books, and then we
okay.
laugh about these book titles.
And then my other novella, well, I have several, but one of the novellas, which I won't talk about, is called Daddy's Worst Nightmare. And that title just bugs me because the book, it's by Jessica Kane. It was a 3.5-star read, so I'm not going to talk really about it. But it's like that title is so misleading because you would think that that's going to be like a Daddy Kink book or something, Daddy's Worst Nightmare.
Yeah.
But it's not. Her dad is a DA and there's threats to her life all the time because of it. And so this like knight in shining armor guy who's like been obsessed with her kidnaps her when her father's house is attacked and like saves her life. And so that's like Daddy's worst nightmare. But why is that like the name of the book? Because
I don't know.
Like it just anyway.
And you'll tell me all the time, you find books that have these weird titles like that, right? Like
yes,
Daddy's Garage Cleaner. And I mean, they're just the weirdest titles. They're the weirdest titles. But they're good books. But for me, I'm such a book cover snob that when I see a title like that, I'm immediately like, no.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry.
Okay, so Naughty Boss by Whitney G. I actually read one other book by Whitney G. It was a novella. Where is it? What was it called? I swear I did. Yeah, I read Cocky Client as well. So those were both novellas. So Naughty Boss is about Michael and Maya. And the reason I picked this novella out of the 5 that I read this week to talk about is because Michael is the CEO for his company and his company is getting ready to go public. But of course, he has been a playboy all over in the tabloids for all of his like sexcapades and stuff. And Maya is his PA. And she is trying really hard to like do a really good job, but he's like an impossible boss. Like he sends her like an email every day, like what I need. And then he signs it by "you're welcome" instead of "thank you." It's like "you're welcome." So you can kind of see where this is going. But what I loved about this is she emails her best friend all the time about her boss. And so she'll be like, "Have I told you lately how much I hate my boss? And this is what he did today, blah, blah, blah." Well, her friend's like, "You need to make sure you're deleting these emails." So she deletes them every time after she sends them to her friend so she doesn't have them saved, which leads her to accidentally sending one of her emails ranting about how much she hates her boss to her boss. Oh. And so then, of course, he emails her back and is like, "No, you haven't told me how much you hate your boss today." And it was just really fun. And then, of course, it's a novella, so it goes very quick. It's steamy and it's a really great read, very quick. I actually really like Whitney G. She does a really good job with her steamy, fun novellas, I think. That being said, they are usually all under 100 pages, so you have to be prepared for like some insta love and for the plot to go pretty quickly. And sometimes books that are novellas, like they miss the mark like big time for me because of that. But Whitney G has this down. Like she does a really good job with writing those quick, steamy insta loves without you going, "Oh, this doesn't feel right." Like it's a good read. I enjoy it.
Good. So I read next. This book was only 3 stars for me. I wasn't very into it, but I think it's my own personal thing. I think other people might not dislike it as much as I did, just kind of depending, just because of the trope, I think. So this one was Fighter's Best Friend by A. Rivers. So this book is about Sydney and Gabe. So Sydney is a surgical resident. So she's a doctor. She's just in her residency. And Gabe is an MMA fighter. And they are best friends. They've been best friends for many, many, many years. She loves his family and they love her and you know, that whole thing. And this is their story. So like, this is what I have a hard time with. I think it's a best friends pining kind of thing is what I have the hardest time with. She's liked him for years. he hasn't noticed her. He, you know, is always late, doesn't show up when she needs him, doesn't show up to their, you know, date nights or their nights where they're supposed to hang out with his friends, and leaves her hanging for hours at a restaurant waiting for him to show up. And then all of a sudden one day he realizes, like, she joins a dating app and starts going on these dates, and then he realizes that he wants her. And
of course he does.
Of course he does. I have such a hard time with that. The whole, I've been pining for him, now I'm going to move on, and now he can't handle it, so now he wants me. I was bored through quite a bit of it, just because I can't stand that trope, I think is what it was. So I don't even know why I was trying. This was one of the free books that I got at Christmas, on Christmas Day, when it was Christmas Day or the day after, when Amazon had all those free books. So, you know, it didn't hurt me that I read it and it was free. It just wasn't for me. So somebody else might love it. If you like that kind of trope, it's a good book. It's just not the kind of trope that I read or that I really like. There wasn't enough drama. So
yeah, as you were talking about it, I'm like, and so as soon as you're like, this wasn't really for me, I'm like, this makes so much more sense.
yes. So what you got?
Okay, I'm gonna just say a couple of books that I read and give like 2-sentence synopsises for them. Okay. So Hearts in Darkness, it's by Laura Kaye. It was a novella. It's done in third person. Third person is not my favorite writing style at all. I think it's because I am a teacher, and so I'm used to a lot of children's literature where it's third person. So I think maybe like my age books. I don't know how to say that. But do you see what I'm saying? I think that's why. Yes, age appropriate books. I feel like first person, that dual point of view is where it's at for me. And so I think that's where it is. So Hearts in Darkness, though, is a really cute story. They meet in an elevator and the power goes out and they're stuck in the elevator. And pretty much the whole storyline is them stuck in the dark in the elevator. They're both kind of working through some things. Him especially, he has some PTSD. And so she's trying to help him stay calm in the elevator. So it was pretty good. I think it's just the 3.5. I gave it 3.5 stars, but I really feel like it's that third person writing style for me. I also finished book 3, A Court of Wings and Rune, in the ACOTAR series.
Yeah.
So that's by Sarah J. Maas. It was a 4 read for me. I know you're going to be disappointed. I'm not saying it's a 5. I listened to the dramatization, which I really, really loved. I had a break in the dramatization though, because I got part 1 and then found out part 3 hadn't come out yet. So I paused at part 1 and then listened to 2 and 3 once 3 was out. So we're going to do a whole video on that. So I'm not going to talk about it because of that and because there's too many spoilers. Yeah. Then I read Annie's Song because you had convinced me to read it.
Because I love it. Yes.
Yes. So that was also written in third person. And then when I started it, I'm like, ugh, third person again. But it's done so well that it doesn't really feel like you're reading third person. It's not, maybe it's because Annie can't speak. So there's less like dialogue to be happening. I don't know. But you don't read Alex said, then the dad said, you know, it doesn't read like that. It's really well done, I think.
Yeah.
I really, really enjoyed it.
I found a lot of like a lot of the historicals that I've read, which granted, when I say a lot, I've only read a handful. I am not into historicals, but I've noticed that a lot of them are in third person. And I don't know what that is. I don't like it.
Yeah, you're right. They are, aren't they?
And I don't understand why. Is it because they're written? I mean, there's historicals that have been written that are within the last 2 years that I've even read that are in third person. And I don't understand that. Is that just like a typical thing for historicals? I don't know.
I don't know. We should look into that.
Yeah.
Let us know in the comments if you've read some historicals more than Jessica and I have. What do you know about those? I mean, I suppose like the Surviving Trace series would be historical fiction to some degree, and those aren't third person, but that's pretty much my only, I think that's my only real reading that I've done.
And I've tried to read a few other ones, like ones that are talked about quite often on booktube as well, like the Highwaymen by Kerrigan Byrne. I couldn't it was all third person and I just couldn't do it. Everybody raves about this book, but I think a lot of the times because historicals are in third person, it makes it very difficult for me to read them. Not as hard as it is for you, because I obviously have read some and I do read books that are in third person, but I have to focus when I do. Yeah.
So I have, let's see. So I already said I read Cocky Client by Whitney G. And yeah, so I have one other that isn't really worth mentioning. So I have 2 books to still talk about, but I think we're back to you now.
Yep, back to me now. So I read Juniper Hill by Devney Perry.
Oh.
Yeah. Do you want to read this one? You've heard of this one, right?
I have. I'm pretty sure it's on my it sounds so familiar. I'm pretty sure it's on my TBR.
I have never read a Devney Perry book that I haven't liked. So Juniper Hill is the second book in her Eden's series. I will go back and read the first one. I actually have the first one as a Mystic Box book. They did, or not Mystic Box. I think it was Bell Box did it, and I have that one. But I really enjoyed this. This one is about Memphis. And Memphis is a new mother. She had a baby. She lived in New York. She got into a relationship that was not good. And she took off with the baby when the baby was a few weeks old. She took a job in Montana. And so at this hotel. And so she moves to Montana, drives across the state. And as a mom, her baby's colicky. The 2 out of my 3 were colicky, which here's my little caveat. If your baby's colicky, I mean, there are babies that are just colicky, but most of the time it's like a food allergy or something that they're reacting to in the milk, because mine were all milk allergies. But my kids cried all the time. So they're talking about this baby crying in the car. That was the only time my kids were quiet, was in the car when I was driving. But the baby is like, got that little tiny newborn cry, is screaming in the car as they're driving, like cross country. And I'm getting all this PTSD from when my kids were little, and I'm having this secondary, emotions because of the baby crying and knowing what that's like being a stressed out mom. But she travels cross country with the baby, drives across country to go work at this hotel, and she's been talking with the person who's hired her, which is Eloise, and she can't find a place to rent, like a place that works within her budget to rent. And so Eloise is like, don't worry, I got you. I'm going to find you a place to rent, so you just show up. And so she does, and she takes her to Eloise, greets her and says, this is where, meet me here. She greets her, and she's at this big, beautiful house, and it has a garage that has an apartment above the garage. And when she gets there, Eloise walks out, and this gorgeous guy walks out. His name is Knox, and it is Eloise's brother, and he is grumpy. This is a total grumpy sunshine situation. He is a complete grump. But she starts to rent the place from him, and he actually owns the restaurant that is attached to the hotel. And so she sees him every day. He's the head chef there, like award-winning head chef. And he has some of his own trauma. She has hers. The baby kind of brings them together because he really does love that baby. And this is their story. I gave it, 4.5 stars. So on Goodreads, I rounded up to 5. I loved it. I loved, you know me, Mandy. I like it when there's a baby involved, typically, as long as the baby or the kids are done right. But I loved this story so much. I want to go back and read the first one. I have this thing with Devney Perry where I tend to read like the second book in her series first for some odd reason, then I go back and read the rest. So the rest I will definitely read. But yeah, like I said, I have not ran into a Devney Perry book that I have not loved.
I just checked, that is on my TBR, so I'm going to have to get that and read it. Maybe I'll start with the first book in the series.
I plan to read the first book this week. Again, while I'm working 14-hour days where I can listen to books now. As of today, we're done with our live thing. So I can listen, and I plan on doing that all this week too. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so my next book was Home Game by Odette Stone. This is book 2 in her Vancouver Wolves hockey series. I've talked about book 1 in one of the other videos that we did. So I loved this book. It was a 5-star read for me. Very different plot that I've read before, and I've read over 400 books. So to find a unique plot is kind of exciting, especially in the hockey world. So this is Dual Point of View from Ryan and Zoe. Zoe is homeless. Like she was in foster care, she aged out and she's homeless, living in Vancouver, just like working this minimum wage job. She stays at a homeless shelter. She keeps all of her money in her backpack and like most of her money just goes to pay for food. But she's trying really hard to like save up and she's hopeful. And there's a few times where she's like, I just wonder if this is when I should just end it. And it's like, oh, sad, but she keeps going. Like she just keeps trying. So Ryan is a hockey player and he's kind of just lonely and lost. He just got traded. He's not bonding with his team and he's used to like his team being his family. And so he is kind of just struggling himself with being there. And he's in a cafe trying to do his tax receipts and he keeps messing stuff up on his computer. And he's like kind of getting freaked out, like, oh my gosh, what did I just do type thing. And Zoe just happens to be sitting like right next to him. And she's like, you just did da da da. And so she helps him. And then he offers her money to, and to help him do his tax receipts right there. And so she's like, okay, like, sure. And she's like, but I have to leave by a certain time because, and then he finds out like she's freaking out because she has to catch the bus because she has to be somewhere. And so he drives her where she wants to go. But when he gets there, he's like, this is like not a good part of town. And he's like kind of concerned for her about what's going on. So she gets out and runs off and he just sits there and watches. And she goes up to this church and gets turned away because it's after the like there's a sign that says homeless shelter like closes at 8 p.m. no exceptions and it's after 8 and she gets turned away and so she starts to walk off and he goes and talks to her and like finds out that she's homeless and things and he tries to help her but she's like no I don't want your help I'm not gonna do sexual favors for things like and he's like what like no like and so he ends up giving her his business card and fast forward to some things happen and she ends up in the hospital and all she has on her is this business card so they call him and he goes and shows up for her and so this is their story of how they get to know each other and how it all works out. And I really, really love that Ryan truly wants to help Zoe. I love that Zoe doesn't want to take his help. Like she's nervous about it, but she takes it because she's basically like, what else do I have? So I feel like there was like a fine line for the author there, like making Zoe seem too desperate and needy and keeping her a strong heroine. Does that make sense? Like,
oh yeah, definitely.
There's a fine line. So it was so good. I absolutely loved the book. Ryan's mom comes to visit and then some things happen that kind of irritated me and I personally felt were unnecessary drama and we could have just continued with the story as is, but I understand as an author, you need to add some drama, some plot twists into your book, but I was just loving it the way it was and I didn't need any more complications in their relationship. It could have just kept on keeping on and I would have been fine with it. So it was a 5-star read. I plan to read more in the series. I really enjoy Odette Stone's books.
Yeah, I do too. I like her as an author. I liked that series when I read it too.
Someday I either want to write my own book or find an author who will just write a book where it's just a happy like romance between two people with like no drama, just like their relationship building and yay. Don't you ever just want that? Like
no, I want the drama. So I will read your book because it's you and it's your book. But I need some drama. Can you like add in a couple chapters for me with some unnecessary drama? Because I need that. I need that.
I know. I normally like I will actually go looking for really angsty books to read at times, but sometimes you just like find this couple where you're like, I don't want like their two different worlds coming together is enough for me. I don't need more outside influences to this situation.
I do get what you're saying, and for sometimes that works. But I'm here for the angst and the drama,
I
okay?
know.
And I think it's because, in all honesty, our everyday lives are so friggin' boring sometimes that give me some drama. Not in my everyday life, though. No, I don't need that in the real life. I'm good with my everyday love story. Thank you very much.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah. So I was obviously on a Devney Perry. Oh my gosh, you have to hit
Okay.
this. Thank you, a Devney Perry kick. I am so tired. I was on a Devney Perry kick this week because the next book I read is Letters to Molly by Devney Perry. Now, I didn't realize this when I started it, but this is the second book in her series, her Mason Jar series. I actually have, the first book is called The Birthday List, and I have that on, I have the audio downloaded and like ready to read on my Audible app on my phone for like when I'm in the car, when the kids aren't in the car with me. And I didn't even realize it was the same thing. So I skipped it. So I'm going to go back and read that this week too, hopefully. But this is the story of Molly and Finn. And Molly and Finn have been divorced for 6 years. They have 2 little kids. And all of a sudden, like they get along for the sake of the kids. But, you know, Finn's been dating, Molly hasn't. And they met when they were in college. And they started a business together. Finn has a landscaping business. And then the kids kind of came along, and she had to pull back to help to be home with the kids. And then, you know, things happened in their marriage and it fell apart. They didn't work on it together and it fell apart. And Finn really didn't put forth an effort because she talks about wanting to go to, her mom is a counselor or a psychologist, and she is always, you know, trying to counsel them, and Finn didn't like that. And so he wouldn't even go to marriage counseling, even though it was with somebody else. So 6 years later, they're divorced, and all of a sudden these letters start to show up. So on the first night that Finn and Molly met back in college, she mentions how writing love letters is like a thing for her. Like, people don't write letters anymore, and all she wants, like, that is the most romantic thing to her. Well, she didn't know this, but Finn went home and wrote her a letter that night. And on major events in their lives, he has written letters to her, but he never gave them to her. Well, all of a sudden, these letters start to show up in the mailbox, and they show up in a handwriting that Molly doesn't recognize. And Finn swears up and down that this box had been in his closet holding all these letters and his wedding ring for years. And now all of a sudden they're missing, and he is not the one who sent them. So we don't know who sent the letters. And she's getting like one every so often. Like, they're just kind of very sporadic when they show up, but they're coming in order. So the first one she gets is the one that he wrote on the first night that he met her. And, you know, as we move forward, and as the letters move forward, it starts to, you know, he wrote things like when their babies were born and stuff, but he also wrote things like when their marriage started to fall apart. And so when they start out being these, you know, really sweet, you know, I'm really into you type letters, I'm going to marry you kind of a thing, then we start to get into the heartbreak and the letters that are really a lot harder to read. And so this, as the letters come, you know, she has to relive all those emotions. They both relive all those emotions. Things are happening on the sidelines with the kids and lives and everything else. And, you know, you would think the letters would immediately push them back together, but it doesn't. And it's them working through these traumas as a married couple. And so it's as a divorced couple. So it's definitely a second chance romance for them. Type book, a second chance romance book. It's one of those where I enjoyed it. Again, it was like a solid 4.5 for me. I just, you know, as a married person, I'm like, why didn't you work on it? Why didn't you communicate? Why? And I get it. Some people, it's just not easy for them. It was just there was little things like that where I was like, I don't get it. Just get back together. I don't get it. So, but I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the progression. I enjoyed you know, when they, like, the whole, like, them figuring out where they both went wrong within their relationship and trying to correct that. So it was very good. I liked it.
It sounds good.
Yeah. Like I said, I have never met a Devney Perry book that did me wrong.
I actually have it on my TBR as well.
Shocker.
I know. I think a lot of our bestie teas is going to be me being like, and then I read this book that Jessica read. Then I read
know.
this
And then
book.
there could be Mandy going, you need to read this book. I've told you over and over again to read this book.
Yes.
I plan to read Perfect Strangers this week too. Okay. Anyhow.
Good. I need to talk to somebody.
I plan. I've already got books downloaded to my Kindle, the audios for work. So we're good. We're there.
Awesome.
Okay.
So I think this will be my last book. This should be my, I guess I've read 11 books, but this is my 5th time talking about books, right?
Yes.
Okay. So I read Tattered Stars by Catherine, is it Cowles or Cowles, I think?
I would say Cowles.
And this is her first book in the Tattered and Torn series. So have you heard of it?
I've heard of the author, and I probably have it on my TBR because it sounds very familiar, but tell me about it.
Okay, so I listened to this on Audible, and this is one of my problems with listening to books on Audible is I listen at a much higher speed than I used to, so I can get through them in less than half the time it says. But most books are at least like 10 plus hours. So that's still like, 5 hours of listening. And what I end up doing is I listen while I'm doing like house chores and like cleaning up, making dinner. I have farm animals, so like stuff out in the barn, fence lines and stuff like that. But then I'll be done with my chores or whatever project I'm working on. And I find that like I'm really into this book and I don't want to stop listening. So then I like find other little things to do, or I just sit in my chair and play like a Tetris game on my phone while I listen.
It's exactly what I do. Yes. Mm-hmm.
So that's what happened with this book. I was up really late listening, but I was just hooked on it. So this is about Hayes and Everly. And this is the Audible is done by Andy Arndt and I think it was Zachary Weber. So two that I
both of them. Yeah.
really enjoy listening to as well. Sometimes I have to take a break though, because I'll listen to I purposely find Audible books with Andy Arndt and I'll be like, I need to take a break from this because like the characters because I recognize the voice, I think like of the character from the other book that I just listened to. Mm-hmm. Do you do that?
It depends. I think so. Okay. So for me with certain narrators, and again, we're going to talk about this in depth at some point, but one of my absolute favorite audiobook narrators is Teddy Hamilton. And so whenever he narrates a book for me, I don't care how the author describes the main male character as looking. I have this image in my head. It is not what Teddy looks like. You never look up your audiobook narrators because even though Teddy Hamilton, no, he's a good looking guy. It's not what I have up here for him. And so it throws it off. And so you don't do that because it'll throw off your main male characters. But so whenever I hear his voice, like when he narrates, all my male characters look like what I envision that voice. The body that a voice.
Yeah.
So yeah, I get to.
So this book starts off, and I'm sort of giving away some spoilers, but they all happen within like the first few pages, like first few minutes of the book. So the book starts off with Everly when she's 11 years old, and she rides her horse into town from the mountains because her family is a prepper family. And so they are very self-reliant. They live kind of in this mountain community. Her other family members are preppers, and there's other people kind of involved in this, but they live like way up in the mountains. And her mom is gone, and she rides into town because her dad is not well. And he has taken like the prepper conspiracy thing too far. And he's kidnapped a little girl that's about her age and is holding her in the shed because he thinks he's protecting her from the evils of her family, but he's not feeding her or giving her water. And she's been in there for several days. So Everly makes the brave choice to ride her horse into town and goes to the police station and gets help. Well, this turns into her really being ostracized by her family because they think she did the wrong thing involving the police because they don't recognize the police authority or anything like that. So her dad gets arrested and goes to prison. She ends up moving away when she's still young. She gets gets to go live with her older sister who's left the family as well. So this is her coming back 16 years later. And Hayes is the sheriff of the town, and she's taking over the family property. It's been empty for a while, and she decides to come back and try and make peace with everything that's happened in her life. And Hayes, his little sister, is the one that was kidnapped by her dad, and it greatly impacted their family while she was missing for those 5 days, obviously, and it still impacts their family to this day. And so he is just rude, and he just wants her to like basically burn the house down and leave and let somebody else buy the land and rebuild there. And this is their story. I really can't talk a lot about it. Like what I've told you happens like within the first few minutes of the book. So I can't really talk much, but you can imagine this is their love story, and her dad is responsible for like the worst thing that's ever happened to his entire family. And it's how they go through that. Lots of things are happening in this book. There's 3 or 4 more books after this one that focus on people in this town. And I'm really excited to read some of the next books after meeting some of the characters in this story. But it was really well done and very different plot. I didn't see that coming at all. When it's like she comes back to town, I'm like assuming it's because they knew each other and she like broke his heart or something, but that's not it at all. But he's the sheriff, so he feels compelled that like he has to protect her, even though he doesn't like her. And then their relationship just kind of starts from there. It was really hard not to, like I said, I ended up listening to the whole thing yesterday because it was really hard to be like, okay, I'm going to be done with this book and read tomorrow. I was like, no, I have to know what's happening.
Yeah. And now when you talk about the book, just the opening, you know, the girl going to town. First, I've heard this book being reviewed before, and I do think it is something, I know it's on my TBR. It's been on there for a while, but it's one that I have heard of. Yeah. So
it's really good. Very different, but really, really good. I really enjoyed it. Like I said, I want to read more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So my last book is Dead of Eve by Pam Godwin. So if you've watched any of our videos, you know that Pam Godwin is like a top author for me. And this is one of the only books. It's a trilogy. It's the trilogy of Eve. It's her trilogy, but this is one of the only ones that I haven't read of Pam Godwin's books. I think there's 2 other books that are standalones that I haven't read, and then this, and this is it. So I put this one off for a while because I knew that it was more of it's still romance, but I knew it was more of like a horror type genre for romance, subgenre. It's definitely post-apocalyptic, paranormal. There's a few other things in there, but basically this is the story of Eve. And when the book opens up, it starts when there has been this plague that has hit everywhere. It's hit the world. And it has killed off all the children and the elderly and all the women. So as far as we know, Eve is the last woman. And she has been through some major trauma at the beginning of this book, and it just keeps on going. It doesn't end throughout the whole book. It does not end. This woman goes through some major trauma over and over and over again. I was sucked in from the beginning. But the virus that has gone through and devastated, like, you know, killed off all the people, it's basically turned people into bugs. If you get sick, like all the men that are still alive that have gotten sick with this virus, it turns them into like the aphids. It turns them into bugs, which is just weird to think about and describe. But there's some things going on with Eve, like her, she can move quickly like these mutated people. She has, like, she can see, they glow neon green in the dark, and she can see that nobody else can see that. She can feel this hum in her body when they're around, like a humming in her chest. Nobody else has that. So there's these questions of, who is she? What is she? Is she really the only last woman? How do we fix this? But in the meantime, when I say she has gone through trauma, holy cow, has she gone through trauma. She has visions of people that she's lost throughout before the story starts, that kind of lead her down this path and lead her to where she's needs to go. So it is a trilogy. And then there's that one novella in the middle, which I'll talk about next week. But I loved it. I loved it. And I know that there's a lot of mixed reviews about it. People don't know how to rate it, but I friggin' loved it. So I can't wait. The only thing that I had a hard time with is like almost all of Pam Godwin's books have audio. This book did not have audio. The novella has audio, and the main male character in that one has a hot Irish accent. But this one, oh yeah, there's a priest involved and a vow of chastity that may or may not continue on. But anyhow, he has an Irish accent and he does a great job. But like, there's no audio, so I actually had to read this one. And being as busy as I was, it was like I was getting home at like 1 o'clock in the morning, and I was like, just one chapter. And then I couldn't figure out why it was taking me so long to read this book. And I'm like, well, if I'm only getting a chapter in every once in a while, that would be why. So, Pam, if you ever see this, come on, I need the audio. Please, I need the audio. But yeah, so I'm anxious to get into the rest. The last 2 books do not have audio as well, so it might take me a hot minute working the way I am right now. So that's it. That's what we read this week.
Okay, that's our bestie book tea. I don't think we said to go grab a beverage, but
no, I forgot. I didn't grab a beverage. So I gotta go to work. I was just getting into let's get this done. So,
yes.
Yeah.
Yep, there's always stuff to do, especially when you're working and your moms and all that.
Moms,
and there's so many books to read.
The books, I just prioritize here. Books.
Yes.
It's all good. So
kids, feed yourself. I'm reading. No, I'm kidding.
Exactly. Yeah. So thank you guys for watching our video. Thank you for joining us this week.
Yes, make sure you check back on Mondays, Thursdays, and Saturdays for new book videos from us.
Yep, and just, again, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you guys next week.
And until then, go read.
Go read.